last video I made this fine steel cabinet, and that's pretty much what it is. It's a big heavy steel box that's painted bright red. Although the paint does need a bit of work on it, it needs another couple of coats. But we'll ignore that for the moment, because watching a man painting is not very exciting, even by my standards. But as you can see, it's a nicely put together steel cabinet. It's got a lovely chimney. I'm very proud of my chimney, as my family will attest. They've all had a chance to admire it. So in this video we get to install all those bits and pieces that will transform it from a bright red steel box into something quite useful. I don't want to say it's a living, breathing thing, but it probably is. In my world, this is exciting, but then I probably need to get out more. So, where shall we start? We could put the doors on, we've got to make them first, or we can start putting the racking inside. It seems sensible really to install the racking, and then we've got something to install the doors up against, doesn't it? In case I forget to tell you later, you can get the plans for this. There is a project book that accompanies this video, and you can get that by going onto the Fitzrobbie website, the details of which are on the bottom of the screen now. Right, it's time to point out some very unexciting progress, but if you don't do it, you give yourself a few problems later on. So, first of all, I put 3 pieces of angle iron per side, with the angle pointing downwards, and these are going to be for our oven shelves. They're spaced 100mm apart, and I've done my damnedest to make sure they go straight backwards. So the other 2 pieces that I put in, one you can see and one you can't, is one at the back here and one on the back of here. They're angled downwards, so it creates a shelf, or a shelf that you put something into, and they're not full width. They're about 50mm short either side. And this is a deliberate policy, this is a design feature. So there'll be an air gap that side and another air gap that side, so the heat, some of it can radiate up, or it can come up and round and then up through the chimney. So the next thing to do is to make ourselves a door. Now we could, if we wanted, just put a piece of plain steel, you know, millimetre thick. So if we put a single skin of steel here, then it's a waste of time putting all that insulation in around the sides, because the heat's just going to escape at the front. So this needs to be a door with insulation in the middle, so 2 skins, an inner and outer skin, and the same vermiculite insulation in between the 2. So what we have here is the metal frame for the door. It's exactly the same 25mm tube as before. Makes it a bit heavy. I would have perhaps liked something with a slightly thinner wall, but this is what I've got, so that's what it will be made of. And I've already fixed the back to it, riveted it in place, and it's exactly the same system as before. Lots of vermiculite. So that's now inside. I'm going to do exactly the same as I've done everywhere else. I'll drill it, I'll rivet it, put some hinges on it, and that's ready to be a door. So now we move on to the firebox door. Now everybody knows that heat rises, and our firebox is at the bottom of the oven. I'm also very conscious of the fact that this thing is becoming incredibly heavy. So what I've made is a piece of straightforward strip steel. Nothing very clever. And this is going to be the door. Once that fits onto that, that will then have a certain amount of strength. So I shall rivet the plate to the frame, hopefully matching up with the rivets on the door above, so we have a certain amount of symmetry. So for the next piece we have to make what I'm calling it the firebox. I mean it's really just a tray, but it sounds far more exciting if you call it a firebox. And what I'm going to do is I shall cut it across here, and then I'm going to bend the sides up, and I've got 75mm round 3 sides and a 50mm bend to come up on one side, and then that theoretically should do it. So I'm just going to cut along this piece first. Well, that didn't take very long, did it? So I'll straighten it up ever so slightly, put a few rivets in the corners, and then that's going to work quite nicely as a firebox. Have your fire in there, you get quite a decent sized fire in that, and that'll give plenty of heat upwards into the oven. We need some oven grills in order to sort of do the cooking on. Now I did look to see how easy it is to buy them, and I have bought them in the past, but they are a ridiculous amount of money for what they actually are. And to get big ones is very, very difficult, and obviously this is going to be a big oven. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my own. So what I've got is a piece of 8mm steel rod. Nobody's going to say that I don't over-engineer things. And I'm just going to start off by bending it round. I know the inside of the oven is 600mm. And then either side we've got a 25mm shelf. So providing I make this somewhere between 600 and 550. Oh, that's an awful lot of room for manoeuvre, isn't it? I should be alright. So I've done this one at 570. So let's see what we end up with. And if I stick to that, I'm going to end up with about 580, which is about what I want, I reckon. So hopefully you can see that I've now welded 3 pieces that way, and this is already starting to gain a certain amount of strength. But obviously we need to do bits going that way. And whilst I would love to do it out of 8mm rod, because I've got lots of that, that makes it ridiculously heavy. It also makes it quite bulky. So what I have got is some 3mm. Something that was left over from another project. So I'm just going to put that in place. Now you'll notice that I've put these little blocks. These are 25mm wide. So what I can do is use these as spacers. I can just keep going all the way down, and then that way I know I'm going to get exactly the spacing that I want, and it's going to look reasonably good. So here we have our grills cleaned up, and that looks rather nice, doesn't it? Now I've now drilled a hole in the centre here. The whole point of this thing is it can be used anywhere. There's no electricity involved. So anywhere you can have a fire, but you do need to know what's going on inside the oven, you know. I know as one of these sort of old timer types, I should be able to sort of touch a piece of seaweed and it will tell me what the oven's doing, but it doesn't actually work like that. So what I've got is one of these sort of clever little thermometers, which I'm going to put in like that. Now I've got one last piece of steel to go into here, and that's a piece across there. So I'll cut that now and put that in place. But this is starting to look rather good. The problem when you have a project like this, which I've been thinking about for so long, is when you actually put it into practice, doubt starts to sort of appear in your mind. Is it actually going to work? And of course, I've never seen one like this. I don't know if it's going to work or not. But I must admit, I'm looking forward to finding out. It's getting quite exciting. So our final piece of steel is the thickest bit I've got in the workshop. It's about 3mm thick, and it fits just there at the bottom of the oven. Now ideally I would have had something slightly thicker. I mean 6mm would have been nice, but I haven't got any 6mm. When lockdown finishes and businesses start to open, one of the things I will get is a slab of granite, 1-inch granite, to fit in this bit at the bottom. So by now you should be able to see how this is going to work. In our firebox at the bottom here, as the name suggests, we're going to have a fire. Be a wood fire. Do you have a charcoal fire if you want to, but I find wood burns much hotter than charcoal. The heat from the wood fire rises. Now, first of all, it's going to heat this big plate at the bottom, and the reason I wanted as thick a plate as I could get is I wanted a heat sink. So whilst it would have been nice to have 6mm, 10mm thick plate at the bottom, this will do for the moment, and then when things change I may be able to get something a bit better than that. The plate doesn't go the full width, there's a 50mm gap either side, so not only can the heat go straight through there and radiate upwards, but it could also take it that way and then up through the chimney. And that's if I'm using it in standard oven mode. I've got a temperature gauge on the top which will tell me just how hot it is at the top of the oven, and as we know, heat rises, so I should be fine. If I want to use it in a sort of a slow cooking mode, then I just don't put so much heat in the bottom. I have a small fire and just keep it trickling over. The other thing you can do is to put one of these Pro Cube smoke cube things in the bottom here, and you can use it as a smoker. Put whatever it is you want to smoke in there. You might want to move that up to there, and then it will just fill the volume with smoke, and you get yourself a cold smoker as well. So you've got a cold smoker, you've got a hot smoker. You've also got a very good oven. Now, as they say, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. So we need to take this outside, light a fire in it, and see whether it works. The first thing you need to do is to have a decent fire in there for a couple of hours, get it nice and hot, and burn off anything in here that shouldn't be there, any oils, and just give it a good burn. Get it nice and warm. So I shall do that in a minute. So here we are, it's Judgment Day. Having worked on this for a couple of weeks, and it does feel like it's been a couple of weeks, it's time to work out, does it actually work? Does it cook? Now yesterday I gave it a bit of a test run just to see if it works, see how high the temperature went. What I discovered is without trying very hard, it got to 400 degrees, which is sort of like all the way up here. And that's 400 degrees centigrade, not 400 degrees Fahrenheit. According to my gauge, that's about 700 degrees Fahrenheit. Which made a bit of a mess of the paintwork on the firebox. But what I did discover is it doesn't need that much of a fire in there. Because of the amount of insulation we've built into this, it's a very efficient oven. It's probably more efficient than the oven you have at home. As you can see, I've not actually got that big a fire in there, but our temperature gauge is starting to climb quite quickly. Now, working on the theory that the sensor is at the top and what I'm going to cook is somewhere in the middle, I probably want to get that to about 200 degrees centigrade, and then I'm ready to start cooking. Well, the oven's come up to temperature, so we're ready to try our first product. Now, for the first test, I made homemade sausage rolls. I made the pastry, I made the sausage meat. If you want the recipe, I'll put it in the book. You have to buy the book to get the recipe. That alone is, it makes it worthwhile. So, in we go. So all I've got to do now is sit back and wait for half an hour. And tend the fire, of course, that's the most difficult bit. It's a hard life, but someone's got to do it. If you've not already found it, not everything I do makes it onto video. A lot of my projects never make it that far. But if you want to find out what I'm doing, have a look at my Instagram page. Or there's the blog, or there's Facebook, or there's many other ways you have of finding out what I'm doing and getting in touch with me. I always like to hear from people. Well, we can put it off no longer. And where else do you get to do cooking in welding gloves? Well, they look cooked to me. Well, for the benefit of the video, I have to pretend that this is the first one I've had, and it's going to be a surprise for me when I get to eat it. In reality, it's number 4. I have to say, I mean, they're always going to be good because they're homemade sausage rolls. But having them in a wood-fired oven just takes it that little bit further. It gives it an excellent taste. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, go and have a look at some of my other videos. You never know, you might enjoy those as well. And do remember to press the subscribe button. It makes quite a difference to my life. So thanks for watching. In the meantime, I'm just going to get on and enjoy my sausage roll. Thank you. Oh, that's good. Oh, that is good. Oh. Watching a man eat a sausage roll on video is never going to be a spectator sport. But I don't care because this is very nice.